Shalom, friends. This is Rabbi Tuly Weisz from Israel 365 here today with Binyamin Horgen. Good morning, Binyamin, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Rabbi Tuly. How are you?
I'm good. And Binyamin, you unfortunately, this past year we're just into January, but last year was, for the most part, a year without a lot of terror attacks, and people thought that Israel was, was going to, have a year without terror. And unfortunately, the end of the year was a very, very sad one for all of us in Israel, but especially for your family. Your wife was murdered just a few weeks ago. Can you tell us about your wife, tell us about Esther, and tell us about what happened 3 weeks ago, please?
Okay, so my dear wife Esther, 52 years old. We have 6 kids. Most of them are grown-ups now, ranging from 29 to 13, and 2 grandkids also, aged 5 and 1. And we live here in a small village in northern Shomron, Samaria, named called Tal Menashe. We actually, our village is at the very, very northern edge of Samaria, and it's a very beautiful and peaceful place. What is called the security fence is built after us, meaning that we are actually, although we are part of Samaria, we are actually, let's say, within the small Israel, let's say, limits. And from security point of view, it's a very safe place and very nice. But this, let's say, little piece of paradise was shaken tremendously 3 weeks ago when my wife Esther went, as she was used to very often, and it was a beautiful day, like today, for instance, and she went out of her home for a jog in the forest, which is nearby, and wow, okay, sorry, and she was ambushed and attacked and eventually killed by terrorists who came from the town of one of the suburbs of Jenin, which is on the other side of the fence, not very far from here, in the Palestinian Authority.
I want to take a minute. You've talked a lot about the geography. Let me take a minute. I'm going to share my screen and show everybody exactly where in Israel we're describing. Okay, so here is Israel, of course, and if we zoom in, so to this area, this is known as the Shomron, right? You could see here,
yes,
exactly. Tal Menashe is here. Okay,
is exactly here, yeah. And you can see to the west of the village, you have this forest. It's a green spot exactly there. Yes, no, not so far, not so far. Just to the left of the T of Tal Menashe, you see this forest, and this is the forest in this place. Yes, exactly. It's a few hundred meters from home. Actually, if I walk there, it's less than 5 minutes. Okay.
And where did you say the terrorist? The terrorist was from?
Well, you see just to the south of Shaked, there is Torah as Sharkiwa. Yeah,
yes,
this is the place where it came from.
Wow.
The thick white line that you see just above it, the thick white line that you see just above it is actually the security fence. Okay?
Yeah.
This is a security fence, so it's
just
behind.
From here to your home is also like probably what, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers?
Yeah, something like that. Something like that. Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
So this guy who was let's say had the previous history and may serve time in the Israeli prisons for terror activities, but not not murder, obviously. And what we heard and what we learned later on was that a friend of his died in Israeli prisons from sickness and 2 months ago, and from some kind of illness. And he was, let's say, moved like by that and decided that he wanted to avenge his death. And the best way he could think of was to kill a Jew. He's a big guy, but apparently not. He selected his victim to be sure that he could reach his goal. Esther was a small woman. She was very slight, weight less than 50 kilos, and very energetic, but still a small person. And it was very painful for me to hear, because to hear that actually the whole attack was quite violent, meaning that he's apparently there was some kind of struggle, and he eventually he hit her with some rocks and crushed her skull. That's terrible.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
And then hid her body. Hid her body in the under the bushes there in the forest. On that Sunday, 3 weeks ago, I was at work, and I called her in the afternoon, telling her that as I was to when I leave the office, in order to let her know when to expect me, more or less. But she didn't answer her phone, and I didn't make a lot of it. This happens. And then I came home, and because of traffic and other things, anyway, I came in quite late. After 6 o'clock, it was already night, and she wasn't home, but her car was there, and her keys and her purse and everything. So I began to worry, started to look around families and friends and everything, but no one saw her. So eventually I went to the police, and they initiated immediately a search, a big search. We suspected that she went into the forest. There was some camera footage that saw her at 2 in the afternoon, actually going into this path into the forest with a very, when you look at the footage, she walks full of life and full of energy, and we see that she is going to do something that she loves, to a place she loves, and she never went out. So we looked the whole night with literally thousands of people, volunteers who came from all over the region to help in the search for Esther. And we used all the, canine units and drones and all the technologies that we could. Obviously, phone tracing and everything. And she eventually was found. And actually, she was found by our dear friend, the party who found her. One of the members was our dear friend Ariel Shalem, whom you know also. He's our neighbor and a very good and close friend, and he was in the group who actually found her body. During that night, obviously, my kids came home, and at around 2 a.m., the head of the regional council, Yossi Dagan, together with our local rabbi, the rabbi of Northern Samaria, who is also a very close friend of us, entered my home and announced the very, let's say, frightful news. We were shocked, really shocked, obviously. Me and my 6 kids and all the friends who were there, and obviously the news spread into the community and then into all of Israel. with a great shock. We wait. The same night, I also, let's say, informed her sisters. Esther had 3 sisters, two of whom were in Israel, and one in Paris, France, where we came from. And we waited until morning in order to prepare the terrain and announce the news to her parents, who are elderly people, 93 years old, live in Jerusalem, and to announce them that their youngest daughter was brutally murdered. It's very difficult. But okay, so it took 2 more days due to, we used to, whenever someone dies, we are trying to bury him as fast as possible in order to honor the dead. And in our case, we had to wait until Tuesday, so 2 days later, due to some investigation needs. And her body was released for burial. And we had a service here, which was very, let's say, emotional, obviously. And since then, we are trying to cope with the new situation as family members and as a community and all the one who knew her. So what we remember, everyone who remembers her remembers her smiling and happy, and this is what we want to this is how we will remember her ever.
Right.
Esther was very well. She was young. She was only 52 years old. Okay, which is young, but she was a young grandmother. But she was really much younger than that. She was always very dynamic, very energetic, and fact is that she did things that teenagers might be doing, going out and dancing, and she loved jumping on the trampoline that we have together with our grandson, who is 5 years old, and she just, it's very, actually, this is something that it's not replaceable. She was not afraid of death. We spoke about it a little bit now and then, because we had also some. Although she externally seemed to be very, let's say, even frivolous, might someone say, but actually she was a very deep and spiritual person, and we had some discussion about death too. And she wasn't afraid of death. She always looked at that as some kind of a passageway, or to something else, to another reality, another being. I think she was a bit afraid of getting old, that maybe her body would betray her, and she wouldn't be able to do all the things that she loved to do anymore. So it's very unfortunate to say, but she won't get old.
Yeah, Benjamin, you told me about a letter that she wrote, an article that she wrote about a terror attack in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That you want to tell us her perspective on terror attacks and the proper response?
Yeah. Yes. So actually, Esther, during her life, had a few centers of interest, and she evolved also during the life, all the time looking for new challenges and new ways to improve herself and do something good in the life. So in the first period of after we got wed, when we were quite young, I met her when we were 21, and less than a year after that we got married. She was at the time a student of art in Jerusalem. And she was an artist for quite a few years, graphic artist, and she did works around Judaica and making very nice work pieces. But at some time in her life, she said that she wanted to do something different, and she went on and studied psychology, and more specifically Jewish psychology, taught in Israel in several places. So she studied it at the Hebrew University, but also with one of the great, let's say, authorities in this field, Dr. Michael Abulafia. And she eventually became a therapist, but a therapist not with, let's say, classic psychology, but with Jewish psychology and the Hasidic approach. And she helped quite a lot of people with a great gift that she had to do so. And one of the things that she did is she wrote for several years articles in a weekly magazine in French for the French Olim here in Israel. And she had a one-pager about psychology, about marriage therapy, and things like that. Following an attack in Jerusalem, it was in, if I'm not mistaken, in 2015 or something like that, or 16. Don't exactly remember. I have to look it up. She wrote an article in this magazine about her reaction as a psychologist and what she thought was a good, right reaction to such terror attacks. And there she describes the perversion of the mind of a terrorist, because it says actually what is the origin of his action are actually in good things. It's in religious sentiments, in the sentiments of that he thinks is of love to God, and then it becomes hatred to man. It's a kind of a perverted way of thinking about God and about fellow human beings. And the correction to that, according to Esther, is to have a right approach to love and to the love of creation and of God and everything. And it begins first by the love of yourself, self-appreciation. And then when you are in this position, when you look at yourself positively, then you are also looking at all the others positively. It's not a narcissistic approach. It's really an appreciation of the godliness that is in everyone. And begin by yourself. We say "Ve'ahavta le'reacha kamocha." You should love your neighbor, your brother like yourself. So the presupposition is that you love yourself.
Right. Yeah. Speaking of the Torah,
so she said that this. Sorry.
No, so it's a very beautiful idea that you're sharing from Esther, and I just wanted to get to one final thing that you shared with me about the Torah inspiring you and kind of comforting you. And during the morning period, so we were reading from the book of Genesis, at the end of the book of Genesis in chapter 45, and it talks about Binyamin in the Bible, and your name is Benjamin. Do you want to just share that idea with everybody and how that's encouraging your family at this time?
Yeah. So we all remember the story of Joseph and his brothers, and it started also with the situation of misunderstanding and hatred, or let's say competition, which led to terrible things, where Joseph was actually put into a pit by his brothers here nearby Tal Menashe, actually in the Emek Dotan, which is really nearby. And then sold to Egypt as a slave, and then he became the king of Egypt. And eventually he meets his brothers 17 years later, when they come following to get some food for themselves and their families. He confronted them and eventually reveals himself, and they are all very, let's say, emotional about it, obviously. And then one of the verses speaks about his encounter with his younger brother, Binyamin, where they actually fall into one other's arm and weep on one another's shoulder. And when I read these verses, it was really during the Shiva, during the 7 days of mourning after Esther's murder. And I couldn't help but read these verses with a new eye, and see that actually during this week, I received thousands and thousands of people. Really, it's not an exaggeration. There were really thousands of people who came over, from the president of the state to all the members of the government, mainly members of the Knesset and public figures, the great Rabbi of Israel, but also simple people we didn't know. Obviously, all our friends and family and whomever knew Esther, but also many people who didn't know her, just were moved by the event and wanted to express their sympathy. And they came from very far away. People had a 2-3 hours drive in order to come to my home, stay with me less than a minute, saying that we support you and we love you and embrace, and then go back home for another 2 or 3 hours drive. Many people like that, and I must say that not only Jews, also Arabs and Israeli Arabs, but also Palestinians whom we knew and we befriended, or others came and expressed their sympathy and their deep, they were deeply moved by the event. And I couldn't help but say, okay, so everyone during this week actually acted out this verse from Genesis. They came and embraced Binyamin and myself in this case, and we wept on one another's shoulder. And as it is described in the Tanakh as an act of reconciliation and the beginning of a better time for them, I hope that I feel that this also was an act of unification and reconciliation between all, because many people came here which were not obviously they are not only people who are ideologically or in the same let's say point of view as we are, but in these times you are not thinking about these things, and I think it's a great message of reconciliation which is needed in many parts of the world, where we see people fighting over petty things, and eventually when you put them in front of such events, they say, okay, I must do a reset and let's look at the bright side. So I think it's a very strong message that came out of it.
Well, Binyamin, thank you very much for sharing that. It's been very moving for me. I know difficult for you to tell this story, but it's so important that, because there are many people from not only Israel, but all over the world who really stand with you, and we're so moved by Esther's, her life and her death, and are just sending you all the love that we can. We want God to comfort you and your children, and just thank you for opening up your heart and sharing us those inspirational messages.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Tuly, for that opportunity. Give me the opportunity to share the message. And I also want to thank you again also for the actual support that you provided us. And I think it's a great expression of love and support, and we are very sensitive to that. And I hope that we will be able to continue and spread these messages, as it's now a call that I have to answer.